Kat, let me start with you first. When we have just look back at this entire year and the impact it's had on women, what kind of runs through your mind?
Yeah, so for me, since I cover the intersection of race and politics and so many other things, I'm always thinking about how are our marginalized communities really being impacted. And I would say, just broadly speaking, for all women, it's been really hard. I mean, we've been hit hard in terms of job loss. We have been hit hard in terms of losing spouses and family members to COVID. So it's just been really heartbreaking to hear some of these stories of families that are struggling because women are out of work. They're unable to take care of their children.
I was thinking about all the stuff Kat talked about, but also how it filters through my lens. And a lot of times I try to step away from that and bring other people's perspective to the fore. But this is one of the first times in my career where what I'm going through has been the big part of the big story. And I gauge it as if I have all kinds of privilege. I have professional privilege, class privilege, economic privilege, racial privilege. And it's been this hard for me. And I look at like how that must mean, like Kat was saying, marginalized women who are out of work, who are have lost family members, who are simply see no path to return to work in the near future because so many schools are still closed, places are not open.
When we look at covering the stories and telling certain stories, are we on the right path?
Well, I mean, if I can be frank, I think the media, we can always do better. We can always do more. One of the things that I'm actually thinking about is not just the personal impact on these women of them being out of work, but what is the actual real world impact when you don't have women in these spaces of employment? You know, the perspectives that we bring, these are very important things that are lacking right now. So I think that we are just really seeing the tip of an iceberg as this really starts to unfold the true impact of being out of work, of the amount of pressure that women are facing with being the primary in their homes, you know, responsible for their children, for their schooling. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. And I don't think yet that we've had enough of a robust discussion about what this all really is.
I think any parent who wants to be a stay-at-home parent should have that ability, but a lot of times women who don't want to leave the workforce are pushed to because it doesn't make financial sense in the short term to stay in the workforce with children. But in the long term, it's a disastrous choice. It reduces a woman's earning potential, her ability to come back to the office, her stability if her marriage is bad and she needs to be able to leave. And that was all before the pandemic. Where we're at now and coming out of this, like Kat said, we haven't even really begun to talk about how this is going to play out. And like you, I'm extremely concerned about when we lose women's voices in these spaces.
Kat, do you think that women of color, women across the board feel more empowered to speak out now in 2021 than they have in the past?
I think in many ways, yes. And I think it's because this past year was something that all of us, I think we have realized was something that we've never experienced and probably will hopefully never experience again. And what that has done is we were in the midst of, and still are, what I call these three crises, right? You had the pandemic, the economic fallout of the pandemic, and also, let's be clear, the racial justice movement, which has impacted so many. And I think that when you've seen so much death, when you have been impacted personally, that a lot of people are saying, if I don't speak out now, when will I? I think that what's also really important about this whole discussion is the role that sexism and in many regards racism plays in that. And when you talk about women of color, Black women in particular, it's this very unique intersection of racism and sexism, which we call misogynoir, right? Which is something very uniquely that Black women face. And I think that that has also manifested in a way where we are seeing so many of us exiting workplaces. And so a lot of my coverage has really centered on finding those voices on the ground to really show and give light to other Americans who have been unaware or have frankly just willingly stuck their heads in the sand in regards to the plight of many women of color. So I've just spent this past year really trying to amplify those voices in a way that wasn't extractive and wasn't harmful. And I hope that what came out the end of it was a new enlightening of how this has been the reality for many people in this country since its inception.
I think a lot of us, a lot of women who consider themselves feminists in the last decade have learned a lot more about intersectional feminism and how the conjunction of race and gender and other identities exacerbates sexism and the discrimination against women that goes along with it. I mean, I think our position was always a little more precarious than a lot of us wanted to acknowledge. And the pandemic has really brought that out. Again, the disparity in domestic work, the ways in which we are pushed to exit or not join the workforce. And then the fact that a lot of women hold jobs that aren't prioritized as being important.
So looking forward, what do you want to write about? What are you looking at covering in the next 6 to 10 months when it comes to this?
Last year marked the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, right, which is when women got the right to vote. And a lot of people that I spoke with noted that it was a bittersweet moment to mark, because for many women of color in this country, we did not have that right. And so when you have this conversation about all these issues, we have to realize that for a lot of women of color, Black women and others, a lot of these rights we did not receive until much, much later. So the question is, how can women unite around these issues in a way that uplifts us all?
I think we really have to start unwinding that damage to what's happened to our kids over the last year. But I look forward to hopefully seeing some big policy changes coming forward. Paid sick leave, maternity leave, childcare stuff. I think there is an option, and I think there is energy around this issue. And I hope that I can advocate for positive changes that are going to benefit all women. And like Kat, we do have different levels of harm that we have to deal with as women, but I hope to find places where we can come together and recognize what does unite us and how we can push for change that helps every one of us.